Good morning, self-lovers. Welcome back to the Self-Love Show. I'm your co-host, Dawn Light, and my beautiful sister here, Trish Wright, is with us. She's also co-host. If you're new to the show, welcome. We're so grateful you're here with us. And if you're a longtime viewer, thank you. We appreciate you. We value you. And just in case you don't know, we're on all the platforms. So please go just type in our name, The Self-Love Show, and you can find us everywhere. There's such golden gems out there. And today we have a great guest. We have our amazing friend Paul Sterling here with us. He has such deep communication to share with us today, and it's going to be a juicy one. So I'm going to read a little bit about Paul before we just jump into the show. Thank you, Paul, for joining us. So today's topic is really juicy. Almost every relationship problem starts as a communication problem. And if these communication problems don't get handled, it can lead to a painful separation or staying together and making each other miserable. I knew there had to be a better way. What I discovered is that there are actually 5 different painful communication mistakes that will stop open and honest communication in its tracks and block any chance of intimacy. We'll talk about how to identify these 5 common communication mistakes, how to avoid them so you can prevent doing the damage they cause, how to recognize when you are making them, and we'll also cover how to repair your connection when you already made them. Paul Sterling went from being a commercial fisherman in Alaska to being the best-selling author, a book on a relationship communication called Are You Less, Love More? He's also an international speaker and has video on intimacy has been seen over 6.6 million times. Yes! His passion is communication and intimacy coaching for couples. Couples from around the world come to him when they still love each other but are having a hard time getting along. He helps clear up the issues, resolve the conflicts, and turn things around so they can remember why they fell in love in the first place. Beautiful. I love your mission.
Well, thank you. It's like a little hard for me to let in my own statement there, being read so well. Oh, and thank you
Hi, Paul.
too.
It's nice to have.
Hi, Trish. Thank you for the mission that you two have of making a difference and bringing light to, challenging topics like this one. And I want to acknowledge all the listeners for being the courageous type of couples that want to make, or whatever relationship form they happen to be in. And the interesting thing about this, Don, is these communication tools, it's like what I say is if you change the way you communicate, you can change your relationship with anyone, including yourself. Mm-hmm. And the other side of that, there's nothing more painful than being in a relationship where your communication drives you apart rather than brings you together. And it's a challenging tool. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to share what I can. So fire away. Ask whatever you want to know.
Okay, 1 second. I'm doing my back end stuff. AKA tagging you and sharing things and doing all the, there's this thing that really annoys me. I don't know if you all have it, but it's insanely annoying to me when I speak with couples or even singles who are like, oh, my relationship is supposed to be perfect and we're not supposed to argue. And I'm like, oh, this is probably one of the most harmful beliefs I've ever heard. And I believed it too. I hook, line, and sinkered. I was like, oh, perfect relationship we'll never have a disagreement. I don't think that that's true. Tell me about what you think, Paul.
So let me give you the big picture here. There's some global beliefs. Like the way I look at it, it's a reverse pyramid. At the top, there's tons of surface beliefs that will make no difference in the world. There's some mid beliefs and there's some core beliefs. And if you change a core belief, I'll give you an example. If you go from atheist to religious or religious to atheist, it changes almost every way you look at life. So what I try to do when I'm working with couples is make not a lot of surface changes, but a few core changes. And here's a core change that's going to tie in a roundabout way to what you just said. There are 2 main paradigms when it comes to relationship. There's the Disney and the Lord of the Rings. In Disney, You work hard, and then your reward is the relationship happily ever after. It's like once you get the reward, you stop working. And that's where it kind of ends, fairy tale. And if there's an argument, something's wrong because I didn't get the happily ever after. Now, in the Lord of the Rings, when you get the relationship, that's when the journey starts. That's when you're facing all the hardships and the challenges and all the rest of it. And what you want to do is you want to have somebody that's worth going on the journey with.
Mm-hmm.
And see,
or
if
to
you
be,
look at, huh?
and to be the person to go on the journey with.
Right. And in this journey, you're going to end up with obstacles. The purpose of obstacles is to help you grow, to become more, to do more. That's a reason. If you think about a goal, a friend of mine, the late Bob Proctor, he was in The Secret. He said the purpose of a goal is to help you grow. It's like when you look at a goal, a worthwhile goal is one where you have to become more to accomplish it.
Mm-hmm.
Versus it's to get the car, the girl, the guy, the money, the whatever it is, but it's who do you have to become along the way? And some people become an asshole along the way to get the goal. That's not a worthwhile goal. So it's like learning to create goals. And the other thing, and we're probably not going to talk too much about it, but you both are familiar with sort of the attachment theory. There's some patterns. And
Yes.
the challenge in a relationship is we all have our patterns. So it's either me and my partner against my patterns or me and my patterns against my partner. And I'll give you an example. One of my former relationships, her sister's husband was an attorney and an alcoholic up in Utah. And they called me in and said, "Can you help?" And I said, "I will give a call. That's not my main field. My field is working with couples on communication and intimacy. But it's people."
Mm-hmm.
So I called him up, and about 10 minutes into the conversation, he goes, "Do you think you're smarter than me and you're going to convince me to not drink?" I go, No. In fact, if I'm not your partner in this, I'm not getting in this at all. So it was him and his pattern, his alcohol, against me, against his wife, against his kids. He lost his wife, he lost the kids, he lost his law license but he kept his pattern.
Yep.
So that's an extreme example, but in almost every relationship breakup, it's somebody and their pattern versus their partner.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a long-winded answer for your question, Trish.
And I wanted to just add to such a cool example, right? Just brought forward the true essence of how curriculum unfolds between people. And what happens is the pattern actually enrolls people to be a type of character or role and play that role so that your pattern plays out, so that you become awake to it.
Yeah.
Yes. And when you let go of the patterning, the conditioning, the misidentifications, the core beliefs that create it, then that person is no longer enrolled in needing to play that specific role any longer, and the whole paradigm or relationship can change for better.
Yeah. And it's important to have, well, one of my trainers, a guy named Marshall Thurber, he was Robert Kiyosaki's trainer, and we ended up being partners. And what he said is mastery is the art of making finer and finer distinctions in a given field.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what allows us to make distinctions is a vocabulary, is a language. So there's a language of relationships. I used to call it the language of love. And if we don't have distinctions in that area, we're going to be lost. And even understanding, like both of you probably very familiar with, the attachment theory. And most people in relationships aren't, but they're dancing in that ocean of attachment theory. And they don't understand whether they're a pursuant or an avoidant. Those are the two most basic ones that I talk about. So in an upset, just to give people an idea, in an upset, what an avoidant will do is they need to go to their cave before I can handle you out here. I need to go calm me here. And then what a pursuant is afraid that if I go to my cave and we're not okay, I'm going to be abandoned. So avoidants tend to want to avoid being smothered, and pursuants are afraid of being abandoned. And I'll give you an interesting story. I used to work for Tony Robbins, and Tony used to be married to Becky. And it's interesting because I got to watch their the dance. So if you would guess, Tony was actually in this particular example. He talked about it, so I'm not like talking behind his back. He talked about it in front of me. But in his world, if you got in an argument, you stayed in the argument. You yelled at each other, you did it, but you did not leave the room. Leaving the room was abandonment and a total sign of disrespect. Now, Becky, his ex-wife, if you raised your voice, that was the ultimate sign of disrespect. So you left the room, you did whatever it was, but you never raised your voice. So imagine them in an upset. Tony raises his voice, she leaves the room, he's going, I'm being abandoned. He's going after her because she shouldn't leave the room. Now she's being, she can't go get her space. And it's just like a hell. But if you know the pattern and you're triggered, so if I'm an avoidant and I go, Dawn and I get in an upset and I go, honey, I need to go on a bike ride. I'm not abandoning you. I'll be back in a half an hour. If I keep talking right now, there's going to be damage I'm going to do. I'm not abandoning you. Are you okay if I'm gone for a half an hour? So I'm taking care of her nervous system, and I'm taking care of mine too, because if I keep talking when I'm really triggered, it's not going to go well.
Mm-hmm.
So I love the attachment theory framework because it really gives people an opportunity to look at their childhood patterning. Because it's incredibly important to see how we developed the identification of how we show up in relationships, what it's supposed to look like, by the time you're 7 years old, actually more like 3, you've already understood how people either relate to the opposite sex or the same sex or intimate partnerships. Like you've already seen how all of that works. And so then we just start sort of playing out this pattern for our whole adulthood,
Mm-hmm.
early childhood, young adulthood, and all of that. And it's incredibly helpful to know what your strategies are for self-care, and incredibly helpful for what your strategies are in conflict, because this is how you can really talk to people about it. So in some of my classwork, it's like, well, what are your strategies? What do you do when in conflict? Like, let's get really clear about those things so that you can be like, I like to chase, or I like to run away, or I do a little bit of this and this. I do a little bit of both. And to be able to share that with your partner, it's incredibly fascinating. And I just want to say, even though you may have one style that you lean more towards, that if you practice moving towards secure attachment, you can get there. It doesn't take that long, just a couple years, actually, if you really commit to it. I mean, honestly. And then you start seeing like, oh, that person's avoidant behavior makes me lean in too much out of my center. Like, oh, is this a healthy pattern for me? Is this a healthy pattern for them? Or, oh, this person's reaction or experience makes me want to withdraw and pull out. How can I take care of myself while expanding my capacity to be with them without taking it on as something about me? Yeah. And how can I be honest about what I'm feeling and be really in touch with this? Attachment theory is so amazing. I really like it a lot. One of my favorite books I keep.
And it's important to practice this when you're not triggered.
Yeah. So Polysecure is one of my favorite attachment books. Okay. It is based in non-monogamy, consensual non-monogamy, but it's incredibly helpful for monogamous couples as well as like relationships in general outside of like friendships and partnerships or family or business. It's an incredibly hopeful attachment theory book. I've really enjoyed it, even though it's sort of based in the non-ethical non-monogamy piece.
Yeah. And there's 3 levels of triggering. We're going to get into triggers, I think, in a little bit, because that's what my book is all about, the 5 triggers that take us out. But I got this originally, I'm trying to remember the guy's name who wrote Wired for Love.
Mm-hmm.
A brilliant book. And there's 3 levels. There's alert, alarm, attack. So alert, you're lying in bed and you hear something go clunk. So you go from, and then the next level is alarm. So alert is when you pay attention. And it could be she said something, he said something, that tone of voice, is there something? You start paying attention. Alarm is you going, is this dangerous? You hear footsteps, you go, is it dangerous? And your nervous system, each level gets more and more agitated. So alert, you hear clunk, you realize it's the dog, you go back to sleep in 2 seconds. Alarm, it's a little bit, the adrenals kicked in and you're trying to figure out, is there danger, not danger? Are they going to say something mean? And then attack, you're full out, it's enemy ally. You've moved into your reptile brain. So this is my little reptile brain. Now, when you know you're in the reptile brain, there's 3 main things that tell you you're in your reptile brain. Number 1 is you can't tell. It's like you go binary. So number 1, binary. So binary is like everything is either dangerous or safe. You're either my enemy or my ally. There's no like shades of gray. This is like when President Bush years ago said, you're either our enemies or our allies. That was like reptile brain going boom. And we all get there. Is it safe or is it dangerous? Is it enemy or ally? And the third one is we can't tell discomfort from danger. So if I'm uncomfortable, I feel threatened. Now, Trish, would it be cool to have one sentence that would take somebody from being totally triggered in the attack mode back down into the alarm or alert mode? One magical sentence.
I mean, yeah, but I think that there's a lot more one sentences that go from regulation to dysregulation.
Well, that can happen in 2 seconds. I mean, at one point I was in,
maybe even one.
Yeah, well, I was in Hawaii. We were traveling, and my ex-wife is in bed next to me, and she elbows me and says, "There's a man standing at the end of the bed." And I went from sleep to full-out attack in 2 seconds. Now, he wasn't supposed to be there, and it didn't get violent, but it was one of those things where I got to experience that really quickly. So I'm going to give you the sentence. I was, one of my clients flies 777s, like these big jumbo jets. And he's flying from Milan to Miami. And they're land and they're taxiing to the gateway. And he hears a commotion. And right behind the door is first class. So there's a big commotion in first class. And when they finally get to the gate, one of the flight attendants comes in and says, "Captain, you got to come back. We got a patient that's freaking out in first class." So he's walking back there and he's going, "What would Paul do? What would Paul do? What would Paul do?" And this woman is yelling, and everybody's like focused on the captain because he could go to TSA, no fly list. She could be arrested. Like he could use all sorts of force. Instead of using force, he asks this magic sentence. "Excuse me, ma'am, what do you need to feel safe right now?" And in that moment, that one sentence goes right to the reptile part of the brain and says, "Oh, is he enemy or ally? He wants me to feel safe, so he's ally." And she calmed down instantly. It calmed down everybody in first class because they're all wondering, like, are they going to physically throw this woman off the plane or arrest her? And as soon as he did that, he calmed everybody down, and she just reached out and touched his hand and said, "I just need to feel secure right now. I need someone I can trust," or something like that. He goes, "I'll take you to customs. I'll walk you through." Now, the pilot, it's a good guy, and he really does care. It wasn't a manipulation. And I have taught this to my beloveds, this single sentence. So I know it's at some level it's a tactic, but it works on my nervous system.
Mhm.
What do you need to feel safe right now?
You know, the I love this, and it's okay to have tools.
Yes.
It's okay to teach a common language. It's okay to you like use things that work. Like, I mean, the common language is what helps us evolve. I mean, I've been working with Dawn for a long time now, and I use her language. She uses my language, like humaning or spiritual curriculum. Like these are two things that we share between us, and it's because we know what that means. We know the things like, oh, and this idea like, oh gosh, like there is this idea. I don't know if you guys heard it in sort of peripherally in our communities where it's like, oh, nonviolent communication is a manipulation. And don't get me wrong, some of times it can be used that way. It is intention. It is the how people are using it for what gain. And if they're truly coming from the authentic place of learning and understanding, like yes. And having a shared language, aka building consensus reality based in like connective, communicative, safe, generous communication is incredibly important. Just saying. Tactic or not.
Is he frozen? I love the statement of what do you need right now to feel safe? I know he'll come back on in the screen in a sec. And as a woman with a highly sensitive nervous system, it it's key ingredient to disarming like when you're in a highly triggered state.
Yeah.
Like it just that's exactly what you want to hear when you're in a highly triggered state. What do you need to feel safe right now? Oh, I actually just need a hug. I need you to listen. I need you to hold the trash can, like whatever it may be, right? Like just speaking from having a highly sensitive nervous system my whole life. And, I just was trained to have an alarming nervous system. And I've had to work with that and how to learn to be safe no matter what environment I'm in, how to learn to give myself that safety regardless of what's going on. That's been the deepest spiritual training with a highly sensitive nervous system.
Yes.
Mhm. Where did he go?
But part of me is like now thinking about it, I'm like, I wonder, I think that a lot of people I know have I think the outlier is not having a sensitive nervous system. I think most of us have sensitive nervous systems. And that one of the biggest arguments is I want to feel safe. Like with it, and it's non-gendered even. It has zero gender. Hold on. Okay. Yeah, it's non-gendered. People want to feel safe. So there's a couple things that maybe you have this experience as well. In my client work, most people either want connection, belonging, safety, and then there's this other one, freedom or novelty. But it's kind of with the safety. I want to feel safe to be free.
Mhm.
And there's this place of like, how do you cultivate safety in your own life? How do you protect yourself? What kind of decisions do you make to really like, contain and care for you? And how are you thinking about caring for other people? And how are you letting in, or how are the people showing up for you in safety? And I love this line, what do you need to feel safe right now? In my life, I hope that when I die someday, that's what people say about me. Is that they
Hmm.
feel safe with me. That's what
Absolutely.
yeah. Just
Absolutely.
so what it would be like to be a safe person. Oh, okay. I'm gonna riff a smidge more. There's a man named William Winters, and he runs a sex positive community in the Bay Area. And at his events, he goes through the consensual conversation piece. And he says this, and I love this so much. I think about it all the time. Be your most trustworthy self.
Gorgeous.
I know. It's so just, to be your most trustworthy self is to show up in integrity, is to be safe for you, but to be thoughtful and considerate and caring for another.
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels so good because people are like, oh, yeah, I'm going to be my most trustworthy self. So, hi, Bob. Welcome back.
I got to practice some of Dawn's calming energy there when my computer just crashed, and I'm like, you got to be kidding. So I must admit that, if the nonviolent communication works with me, an ex-commercial fisherman, it will work with almost anybody. Because I was tempted to give my computer swimming lessons. So that tells you.
Well, so I took a domestic violence course. Okay, I'm going to stop bantering because I'm taking up a lot of airspace. But I took this domestic violence class the other day that is sort of like, it's called Emerge Counseling Abusers. It was really fantastic. I'm still processing it a little bit. But what I really loved about it is, so the first section isn't really about compassion. It's just sort of like kind of helping them understand how they've been socialized. We'll call it that. That's not what they would call it. How they've been socialized to live in an aggressive world. Most people lived in poverty, so I mean, poverty often breeds crime because of without the and I mean, it only breeds crime because like wealthier people don't actually go out and do violent crimes. They do white collar crimes or blue collar crimes. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. but in this sense is like they really showed people like what the definition of abuse was, what subtle abuses were, what this all looked like, and people would go, whoa, and have these ahas. And then the second section, so if they made it through the first section where they learned and understood how they harmed, would go into the second section, which was a lot more about the empathy within the group, not the people who were we're in the criminal system is what I'm taking. So it wasn't like the people who are hosting doing the like empathizing, but how people held each other up in the group and held each other accountable in the next 40 sessions was really fascinating. We got to speak to someone who had killed his wife 33 years ago, and how he had the aha. And he's like, he shared, he's like, this is like 33 years later. He's like, I had a therapy session 2 days ago, and it blew my mind that my mom, like I got angry because I wanted my mom to protect me from my dad. And then I thought about it and I was like, oh, my mom had this socialization and she had this her grandmother. And then he just walked it back to all of these places. And it was really telling to say, we are all socialized in an aggressive, violent world to get what we want, to be forceful. And this is the practice of evolving or awakening, or is to learn nonviolent communication, to learn compassionate communication, to actually unfold that so that we can share. Like, I don't need to be violent. So yeah, I mean, first commercial fisherman, you got some stuff like but you're also choosing to unravel that pattern.
Well, see, and this came from Marshall Rosenberg, one of the creators of nonviolent communication. But it's like once you get an enemy image, once you're so we communicate from our head, our heart, or our hurt, the reptile brain. Once we're in the reptile brain, we have an enemy image, and we've been socialized that once they're the enemy, all violence is justified. It's like everything, it's actually amplified. And I taught in prison for 8.5 years. So it was interesting. I was teaching in jail and I was teaching the professors at Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado at the same time, basically the same information. It was a little different because at Naropa, they're training counselors and therapists, and I'm teaching the inmates, and so it's the second day of one of the courses, and it's maximum security group, and this guy is walking by me. He's walking out, and he stops. And if you've ever been in jail, at least I'll just say for me, when I go in there, I have heightened senses. I have spider senses, like, when somebody's near me, because when I'm teaching these guys, I'm in a room with 20 maximum security inmates, no guards, no nothing. There's not even a camera. Like, if things go wrong, it could go really wrong. So he's walking by me. He stops. He starts backing up. And I'm like, okay. And he looks at me. And he goes, Paul, if I had learned this stuff in high school, I wouldn't have spent 20 years in jail. And you look at what 20 years in jail, and we have a society that thinks that that punishment works. No, 20 years in jail, if you think about it, on a low cost, and it costs $30,000 a year to do it, to house an inmate, to $100,000. So a low cost, 30,000, 10 years, that's 300,000, 20 years. We spent $600,000 on that one human being to keep him locked up, and did almost zero to help improve his life. So when he gets out, he is no more prepared to deal with society. Right. But it's like, Trish, that conditioning, I call it your ROS, your relationship operating system, like your little phone operating system, your computer operating system.
Do you want to share?
Huh?
Do you want to share it?
The operating system. Let's see. Oh, I didn't.
Oh, you're not. Oh, I understand. Well, it's okay. Tell us about it while you're looking.
And you think I can multitask? You're giving me qualities I don't have.
Okay, how about here? We'll help you. So, Paul has amazing graphics that he makes. This is one of your really sweet skills, Paul.
Yes, he was showing us before the show, and they're wonderful. So I know you'll pull it up and be able to show it. And
yeah. And it's taking its time. When the computer crashed, it shut down. So if you think about it, we have the 3 different parts. When I work with couples, I help them look at their mindset, their heart set, and their skill set. So your heart set is all about your feelings and needs, and we have 3 different relationships. We have this relationship that's a friendship. Oh, are you still hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, because my computer's acting a little grumpy right now. So we have a friendship, a partnership, and a lovership, and each one of those has different needs and feelings. So we need to connect to all 3 of those.
Technical difficulties today.
Of course. It's one of the endearing qualities about this show. You never know.
You never know. It's true. I can speak about, like, when you're in a deep trigger, it's so important to just like honor yourself and work your process, and really be committed to learning the things that will work your process and support your person in knowing whoever that person is in your life, knowing how to communicate, like, I'm really triggered. I need some space. I need some time. I need to go growl in the pillow or whatever it may be, right? And that way your person doesn't take it personal. Because it's inevitable that usually when you're in a triggered state or a hurt state, you're going to spout out information that isn't really truly accurate. You're reflecting the deeper misidentifications that is the core of what's going on. And a lot of times that other person that's involved could deeply be hurt or take it personal. And so I find that that's a really common denominator that goes on in relationships. I see it happen a lot. And so it's important to remember, if you can build within yourself a resilience to actually acknowledge when you're triggered and say to your person, you don't have to do it perfectly. Just say I'm triggered and I don't know what I need. I either need space or I need to go for a walk, or I just really don't want to say anything out of harm or create more conflict between us.
Yes. It's one of the things that I love to teach my people.
Mm-hmm.
I call it, I mean, we did this a long time ago. Yeah, we did this a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
A show on this. It's kind of like the compliment sandwich. But
True.
reassurance goes a long, long way. Scott calls it a connected timeout. Scott of Love Coach Academy. And so the brief kind of tool that I teach, because I mean, I like things that I can recall really easily. So
Yes.
reassure your partner,
Mm-hmm.
and then get really clear about what you need, where you're at. So, Dawn, I love you. I still want to be in this relationship. I'm totally in it. I'm really angry. And I need a little bit of space. So it'd be like that. Then you need a frame. How much time? Because for anybody who is anxious or leaning in, they're going to need that time frame to settle their nervous system. Because if you don't do that, it's just going to keep rising and turning into a big trigger trauma for them. And they're going to be unsettled. So when you get back after being calm, whew, it's going to get all wild from there. So time frame, and then more reassurance. And the key point is to actually do either like come back and renegotiate that time frame. So it'd be like, hey, Dawn, I love you. I want this relationship. I'm really upset right now. I won't be able to say anything nice or even anything that's going to be productive.
Right? Mm-hmm.
I need like an hour or two to go walk and calm my nervous system. I promise that I will text you in 2 hours just to see if I've gotten myself back together, and we'll see if we can come back together then. And I do want to just let you know that I love you so much, and our relationship is incredibly important to me. I'm wildly invested. Like, that just feels good. It feels safe, right? So thank you for bringing that up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it happens. It happens. This is the nature of relationships and human. We get each other, you know? Like, it even happened for me this week. Like, I had a very intense 2 weeks. I've been doing a really intense training, and it's taken up a lot of my time. And on top of that, I've had a lot of other side things come my way of like pulling on me and wanting my time while I was really consumed. And so one of my lovely, beautiful friends, like such close friends, reached out and was really like nudging me about, doing a task that I had agreed to do, but I needed to communicate I would not be able to do it until after I was done, And then they, of course, because I communicated in a shorter manner, like, I won't be able to do this right now. And then, of course, they took that personal, and it's all through text messaging on top of it, right? So you don't hear the tone, you don't hear and then I got this long, text message of feelings. And then I had to immediately say, look, I love you. You matter to me. Our relationship matters. Our relationship matters. This is how I recovered it. Our relationship matters. I'm very, very taxed for time right now and in a heightened trigger. I'm not able to do your task right now, but I promise I will get to this as soon as my bandwidth and space opens up again in a week. Just give me a week, please. And I love you and I appreciate you and you matter to me.
And how did that land?
And I got all these like voice messages of love and like, oh, it's okay. I totally get it. Like, yeah. So it's just immediately meeting it with you matter to me. Like, that's a very core, you're back, yay. It's a very, very core, a core belief system that people carry is the need to know they matter and to feel a sense of belonging.
Yeah, Dawn,
Safe?
I got to listen in a little bit before you brought me up.
Come on in.
So sweet and so precious. Like it's like there's this Sarah Bareilles song from Waitress, and it's "You Matter to Me," and it's like that's what we all. That's the essence of the work I do with couples, and what I want for me. I want to know that I matter. It's one of the top 10 needs
Yes.
for individuals. So am I significant? Am I a priority? Is there certainty? Is there trust? And growth, contribution. Then the 3 shades of intimacy: physical, emotional, and sexual intimacy. So there's 3 different things that need to be talked about. So, and thank you. My computer's having a bad morning.
It's okay. That's all right. We roll with it. Like,
way to be resilient.
Yeah, I figured the 2 of you would have plenty to talk about. I've never met 2 more educated and outgoing, amazing women.
Oh, we appreciate you. Thank you.
I'm gonna send you out into space right now, and you can share what you want to share with us. And I'm also gonna.
There we go. So what we're trying to do is create communication that actually brings us closer rather than pushing us away. So our communication is doing one of 2 things. It's creating connection, compassion, cooperation, or it's creating resistance, resentment, and regret. So the idea here is to set it up so it brings you closer. And actually, so can you, well, I'll move the other screen over there. I'm learning your system. Okay, so I want to do some quick takeaways, and so interact with me as much as you want, so that I'm clear that I'm clear. So Dawn, if we're communicating, I'm either talking at you or with you. And I want people to get that this is the essence of communication. And this is the embarrassing thing for me. I grew up in a family where people talked at each other. And if I was listening to you, I was listening, and over here, I was listening for rather than to. I was listening for you to shut up long enough that I could jump in and say something and be smart. I wasn't actually listening to what you had to say. And if I was listening to what you had to say, I was listening for information that I could use rather than a connection to understand you. So I was listening for either my turn or information I could use when it is my turn. Now, that's not very fulfilling. So my book and everything I do, I want to wrap it around to this one slide that we're either listening, talking to somebody, or talking at them. So can you relate to that? That makes sense, that first concept? And when I'm listening to you and communicating with you, I'm listening to you, I'm curious. Like, I was working with a couple last night, and she said something about accountability. And that word went by, and I stopped her and I said, no, please go back. Tell me more. Like, you know that you're curious and interested when you use those magic words. Tell me more. Go deeper in that. There's probably a reason you're saying that. I want to know more. I want to go into your world. And see, Dawn, earlier you brought up that nonviolent communication can be used as a manipulation. Absolutely. When we're listening from our head rather than listening from our heart, I know that I'm doing the communication. I hate to say the word right, but I'm being effective when I can feel it in my body. If Dawn's upset and I listen to her, and then I find out what's her story, not just the words, but like I have a physiological reaction to her story, like, oh my God, no wonder she's upset. If I was telling myself that story, I'd be upset too. So communication, to complete communication, if Trish tells me, do you understand? I'll rarely say, yes, I understand. What I'll say is, let me tell you what I think I heard. And so here's what I think I heard. And how do I know I nailed it? She'll go, that's right. Not you're right. You're right is sort of a blow off. Like if you're right, you don't want to get in that conversation of you're right. So you want to get in the conversation. You know, you've demonstrated empathy when you hear her say, that's right. That's how I feel. No. And it's like, when I really am there, it's like, no wonder you're upset. I totally get it. It makes sense because I have that reaction. Now, there's a ton on this one slide. Normally I wouldn't put all of this on a single slide, but I got carried away. Now down here in this one corner, so maybe Trish will bounce back and forth because I want to make sure I'm being clear. The levels of communication, 5 levels: reactive, responsive, resourceful, reflecting, and revealing. So level 1, reactive. So if Trish and I are in something that's reactive, there's going to be one dominator, and our battle is either I'm going to dominate you or you're going to dominate me. But there's no win-win. There's like, oh, that's a different point of view. There's a right and a wrong. And when we're in that, that's a dangerous place to be. That's low trust. And you feel like the enemy to me. Does that make sense? The next level is responsive. So when you're responsive, I could go, do you want to go to dinner? You can say yes, no. You're not taking it. You're in an elevated space. You're not taking it personally. You're not going, what do you mean go to dinner? Didn't I cook? It's like you're not reactive, you're responsive. The next level up is resourceful. So when we're resourceful, we have something to bring. I say, you want to go to dinner? And you might go, no, I'd rather go out to a movie. Or, there's the conversation is resourceful. And one of our mutual friends and a great love coach, Scott Katamis, talks about when you enter a conversation, you can ask in advance, how resourced do you feel right now? Because if you don't feel resourceful, we shouldn't be talking about money or the kids or some important emotional topic. If you're not resourceful, we're setting ourselves up to fail. And then reflecting, it's like what Dawn did while I was in the waiting room there. She reflected back and created a safe space for that other person to know that they were still important. And then the other thing Dawn did is its highest level is revealing. She revealed her feelings. I still love you. You're still important to me. But we don't reveal ourselves to our enemies. So if we're in a place where we're treating each other like enemies, that's where we go all the way down to the bottom. So that's pretty much a quick run through of that slide. I'm wondering if there's anything that either of you want to say about that before I bounce into the book with the little time we have left.
We're good. Keep going.
All right. So let's I got to switch screens here. Okay. Now, I was in New York City about 6 or 7 years ago, and I was in the subways, and I am not a city kid. I'm a country kid. Even though I was born in Manhattan, I'm a country kid. So what do you need to get around a subway is a map, because subways are complex. There's like, I forget, 400 miles of railroad and 20 or several hundred stations. I forget all it's complicated. Relationships are complicated. Nobody's made a map of them. So I made a map of relationships. And the map looks a little complicated the first time you see it, but it's really quite simple. There's the heart set, which is all about your feelings and needs. And your needs either feel like a burden or feel precious. And you have 3 different relationships. If you're in a long-term committed relationship, whether it's polyamorous, monogamous, whatever it is, you're dealing with friends, partners, lovers, and you need to make sure all of these needs are getting met in relationships. Over here, you have skills. How do you meet each other's needs? And your skills, you're either unprepared or well-equipped. Now the wonderful thing is you can hit replay on this or back up and watch it again and again and again, because I'm going fast. But the number one skill you want to have is being able to clear up the past. Because if you don't clear up the past is in the present and it ruins all possibilities for the future. So that's your skill set. And there's 7 core skills when I'm working with couples. I teach them, and I'm not going to go to there now. The third thing that's running the show. So over here, we have why you're in a relationship. Over here, we have how to be in a relationship. And up here, we have what's running the show, which is your mindset. And the challenge was it's invisible, made up of your habits, patterns, and beliefs. And they're either set up, and Trish said something earlier about like your 7-year-old. It's like you have a 7-year-old often. If you haven't updated your relationship operating system, you have a 7-year-old running your relationship and often wrecking it and sabotaging it. So that is like a map of it. And I used to be a professional skier, so I put the ski things. So when you think about it, when you think about relationships, are you a beginner, an intermediate, an expert, or can you ski on the double diamonds and you're really an expert? And it takes work. All of us have mentors. Even we're all mentors on this call, and we have 2 or 3 mentors normally because we're playing at such a high level, and we need that reflected back to us. So let's see, how do I take that off so we can see us again? And if people want, they can get a hold of me and I can send them that slide. What I want to do in the last few minutes is say what I started with is how many of you out there want to argue less and love more? And that, yeah. And the quality of our communication equals the quality of our relationship. And so I wrote a book called Argue Less, Love More, and it goes through 5 triggers, because once we trigger our partner, they have this listening switch. It's like Charlie Brown, when they showed Charlie Brown and he's listening to his teacher and all he hears is wah, 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 wah. And when you trigger your partner, they no longer hear you. They hear wah, 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 wah. And that's even if that's optimistic.
That's such a good, perfect way of explaining it.
Yeah. And it's so important because once your partner shuts down, it doesn't matter what you say. You can use all the logic, the reason, build the case. You can do all that stuff. So I'm going to say what the 5 are. And if people want to know more, there's several things they can do. They can get my book for free, several different ways. But get it, study it. Don't just like get it and put it under your pillow. You've got to read it and learn it and come back and watch the show more times. Okay, so here are the 5. I'll go through them semi-quick. Case building, storytelling, message assuming, cup stuffing, and the fatal F's. So case building. Anything you say can and what?
Will be used against you.
In the bedroom, in the bathroom, in the most embarrassing times, to leverage, manipulate, and make you feel bad. And you can be case building for all the right reasons. It still doesn't work. Like you could be building a case about why somebody shouldn't use meth or heroin or be abusive or all the rest of that. And when you build a case against somebody versus a connection with them, what you're going to get is resistance, resentment, and regret.
Yep.
So case building, number 1, storytelling. And by the way, some people say I make the same mistake only once. I go, BS. I made the same mistake so many times I wrote a book on it. It's like when I was talking to Marianne Williamson about books, someone else had said, I wrote this book to get the word out. She goes, you don't write the book to get the word out. You wrote the book to get the word in.
Yes, I love her.
This is she's badass. I mean, we had a good talk. So the second mistake is storytelling. So we make up meanings. And one of the meanings we make up, my employee, his wife was coming home late just before Christmas. His story was she's starting to have an affair. What she was actually doing is she was staying late, getting overtime so she could buy him a computer. But where the vulnerability comes is if I share my story, if I share what's alive in me, and I don't share it as if it's a fact, I go to Trish, this is my story. When you didn't show up on time, I made up a story, you don't care, or something like that. So message assuming is the next one. We're kind of familiar with it, but if I talk to Trish, I would say, can you tell me what you heard me say? Or if I'm listening to Trish, I might go, here's what I think I heard. Because my favorite quote of Marshall Rosenberg's is the normal outcome of most communication is misunderstanding.
Yes.
And if you get that, then you go, oh, misunderstanding is normal. What are we going to do about it? So number 3 is message assuming. Number 4 is cup stuffing. So how much more can I get in the cup if the cup is full? What if I yell at the cup? What if I withhold love, sex, and affection? So what do I need to do? I need to empty the cup before I can put anything else in there.
Yes.
And the last, and by the way, I'm giving these really fast. You got to study this because you got to reprogram yourself. Last one, the fatal F's: fix, fight, flee. Somebody comes to me in pain, my partner, and the first thing I want to do is fix them. Yeah, I love Trish's reaction. But think about it. If a guy came to another guy and said, hey, I got a flat tire, and we go, how do you feel about your flat? You want to talk about it? No, it's like we go, let's just fix the damn thing. So that's our cultural conditioning. And then we come to our women. This tends to be a masculine trait. Although I've worked with gay and lesbian couples, it goes across the board. It's the masculine energies. I want to fix it because I'm too uncomfortable. So that's it. I know we're at the edge of time. If people want this, they can go to arguelesslovemore.net/free book. Now, if they're in the US, it's semi-free. You pay shipping and handling $6.95, or you go to Amazon and pay $20 for the book. If you're outside the country, you can get the digital version. You go to arguelesslovemore.net/digital, and you can get that for $2.97. It is a book that will rock your world. And when I train one-on-one, working with couples, it normally takes about $1,200 for them to learn these tools, learning it directly from me. So until I wrote the book, that was it. All right, there you go.
Wow, you did a good
job. Bye, everybody. Have a wonderful week. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you so much.
Paul, thank you so much for your time and your energy today and your expertise and going at hyper speed and really just rolling with the punches because, this is the world we live in. It's sometimes it breaks down and sometimes it keeps moving and who knows what's going to happen. So resilience in the spontaneity of life. I appreciate you.
Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you for hosting it and making it happen. I really appreciate it. And it's fun to get met by people who get it. It's a gift.
Get met by people who've read your book.
Well, by the two of you who.
We love you. And we're so grateful that you shared your expertise today on the show. I'd like to give a big shout out to all the people who make this run. First shout out to Russell and Roy, our VAs who really just full support this beautiful, all of the Self-Love Show and everything. So that's where you can find us on. That's why you can find us on KPFZ 88.1. That's where you can find us on all the podcast platforms and on YouTube. And they just make the world work. And those epic graphics, the one that Paul was on, that's all their work. Also, I'd love to give a big shout out to our mentor and muse, Scott Katamas, Love Coach Academy, Sign Network for sharing us out on like 50 different pages all the time. And as well as Global Peace Tribe, who is our parent host. So thank you all so much for joining us. If you want to find out more about us or Paul, you can follow this show either on YouTube, Facebook, or anywhere else that it's being run right now. And we'll see you next week. Same time, same place.
And Tricia, if they want to have a breakthrough session, we'll spend a half an hour. It's a complimentary thing. It's a deep dive to see whether they want to work together and find out if a breakthrough is right for them. So thank you so much to you and Don, and like you said, Scott, and all of the light workers, the people that are trying to make this planet a better place to live and relationships more harmonious. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everyone. We'll talk to you next week.